As a player who loves to compete in Super Smash Bros. Ultimates, I tend to participate in tournaments all the time. A few months back, I was regularly attending local events, and I entered a fair share of major competitions throughout the first year of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's life. I need to regularly compete if I want to be a consistent competitor, and so I've been trying to enter tourneys wherever and whenever I can. But up until now, I never really participated in an online tournament. Well, that has now changed. I have been trying to regularly compete in online tournaments in an attempt to further my competitive skills, and hopefully playing well in online tourneys will mean that I will perform decently in offline tourneys in the future. I know that there are many players out there who will say that online tourneys are very different than offline tourneys, and while I do agree to some extent, I still think that competing in online tournaments is still one of the best ways that a competitive player, such as myself, can practice. I've already expressed my frustrations in practicing online, whether it be against random players in quick play or more specific players in battle arenas, but hopefully competing in a tournament will mean that I won't have to worry about playing against Swagboy69 and worrying about him kicking me out of his arena after I win just one match. Nah, none of that poor sportsmanship. Tourneys are serious business. Those who enter them have to play a best 2 out of 3 and will presumably be more skilled than the average player. Right? Right? Well, that was my mindset before I started competing, but unfortunately, even in official competitions, online play still has its fair share of problems too. And I plan to discuss those issues in today's video. Today's video is a tourney-focused video, of which I've had plenty in my series. However, throughout this series, I've generally only discussed major tourneys that I've entered. I don't usually discuss smaller events such as locals or weekly events. But I really feel that it's important to talk about online competitions in this series, especially since I've entered a fair share of them now. So to compensate for each of these tourneys being relatively small in scale, except for one technically, I've decided to discuss 6 different tourneys. Yes, that's right, 6. Though I'll be splitting this topic into 2 videos. Initially, I wanted to cover all 6 tourneys in one video, but after writing and editing a bit of this video, I realized that the video was becoming quite long. So I'll be discussing 3 tourneys today and 3 tourneys next time. More specifically, the 3 tourneys that I plan to discuss today all took place prior to the release of Min Min as a downloadable fighter, so if you want to see me compete in a tourney using Min Min, tune in next time. That also means that the new small battlefield stage won't be showcased in this video, but don't worry, I have plenty to say about that stage in a future video. With that said, welcome to the first 2-parter of this series. If you'd like to hear about one specific tourney, there will be timestamps in the description down below. But otherwise, I've got a lot of ground to cover today, so let's hop to it. Come join me as I discuss the competitive world of online tourneys. Hello humans, I'm Yoshiller, and welcome back to some more Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Road to Sakurai! I've been trying to get with the times as of late, and for today's video, that means accepting the fact that online tourneys are becoming the new norm due to real-world circumstances. But considering the fact I generally use Smash's online services to practice anyway, I figured that competing in an online tourney just seemed like something I should do at some point anyway. Although the concept of competing online sounds relatively convenient, as you don't have to travel anywhere, book any hotel rooms, or stay out too late, and you can compete from the comfort of your own home, online tourneys do have their fair share of inconveniences. Generally speaking, you'll need a LAN adapter. Are you serious about competing online? Because if so, some tourney matches actually require a wired connection. I figured that I'm serious about competing, so I went ahead and bought one, and I can only hope that it'll be a worthy investment. I get it. Nobody likes lag. Lag can completely ruin matches, and it does not exist in a local environment. I've had lag completely ruin me plenty of times. I just feel bad that I have to keep sinking money into this game, and I feel bad for other players who have to keep sinking money so that they can stay in a competitive environment. Oh, but a LAN adapter isn't the only thing that a competitive player will need. If you plan on competing online, your internet connection better be strong, or else you might not even be allowed to compete at all. LAN adapter or no LAN adapter, you can't compete if your internet is bad. And vice versa, good internet or bad internet, you may not be able to compete at all if you don't have a LAN adapter. And then on top of that, you'll need to buy Nintendo Switch Online. But I guess I'm not opposed to any of this. These rules are placed in order to maintain a certain level of quality, I get that. We all want to play lagless matches. I'm just pointing out that these requirements will actually isolate a fair share of players who may want to keep competing. There may be great players out there who just sadly can't afford a good internet connection. Granted, not every tournament requires a LAN connection, and in most circumstances you are allowed to request a lag check at any point during your tournament run. And trust me, a lot of players will do that, which causes tourneys to last even longer than they probably should. And despite all of this, despite competing in an official event, players will still be laggy, players will still be poor sports, and players will still be uncommunicative. And so, as a means of communicating more properly, players will often be required to have a Discord account and sign into a Discord server. It's not a big deal, this merely serves as a means of contacting registered players and moderators, but at this point, I'm part of so many Discord servers that I hardly use. That's my fault, really. I could always leave and rejoin them, but I just wanted to make the point. Oh, and beyond that, you better make sure that you're constantly looking at a tourney page if you're competing. If you're even 2 minutes late to checking in, you could be at risk for disqualification. And sometimes players won't respond until the very last minute, if they respond at all, and online tourneys can wind up taking all day as a result. You really just have to sit there and keep an eye on the website. And let's say some of your opponents never show up, which I assure you is a highly probable option in an online competition. In this instance, a match you were probably supposed to start at 7 p.m. probably won't start until 8 p.m., and you might get a win because your opponent got disqualified, and sure, you get a win in the tourney, but it doesn't mean anything. It's been an hour and you're only just now setting up to play a game. You can't really practice in the meantime. What if your opponent shows up? Now you're keeping him waiting, and it's not even about getting even and saying, well, he made me wait. This is about getting the tournament running. You're holding everyone else up if you choose to go and practice in the meantime. So you really just have to sit there until every match is done, and then be ready for your next match ASAP. And I do mean ASAP. It's minor nitpicks, I know, but I'm saying all of this just because I prefer competing in a local setting, and I'm sure most competitors do too. They're usually much more organized and much more lenient. And more often than not, I don't really find online competitions to be too friendly. Don't get me wrong, I haven't had any beef with online players, at least as far as I'm aware, but things just don't feel as welcoming as when I was attending local events. I guess I've now kind of taken local events for granted. Instead of hanging out with other players and laughing with some of my competitors, I'm now greeted with a chat box where people just send me the room ID and say GG's after a match. I mean, I don't know, maybe an online tourney isn't the best way to make friends. I made a fair share of friends by competing locally, and I just don't think that type of thing will happen with online events now. When I competed in locals, there was some fun to be had in seeing who your opponent was, especially if the opposing player was well known. And I try to be friendly with my opponents, whether it's local or online, and I'll often say things like, I'm fine with any stage and we'll jump right into it, but for better or for worse, online players don't want to make small talk, they just want to play. And I guess that's fine, I feel that way sometimes too, especially when the matches take a while to get started anyway, but it just doesn't feel as fun, you know? You compete in these tourneys, and when you lose, people will often say, well, did you have fun? And at a local event, I can usually say yes. With an online event, I don't know. And then when your opponent finally does show up in an online event, it's still a bit of a process to get a match started. You exchange your arena IDs, you meet up, that's fine, but then you gotta go through the stage striking process, and look, again, none of this is frustrating, it's just time consuming. And I swear local events are just easier. You really gotta set a lot of stuff up just to play one match online. So, I'd say it's surprisingly easier to be at an event in person than it is to play online at this point. Yes, you have to pay some sort of fee when you enter a local event, but at least you're better taken care of. But anyway, there are tons of online tourneys to enter, and in the grand scheme of things, they are easier to find and register for than local tourneys. So, I entered a bunch of them. And I really shouldn't be complaining because everybody who competes online has to go through this. So I better suck it up and get used to it. This is life now. I just wanted to bring these issues up because they'll be relevant in some of the tourneys that I'll be discussing throughout this two-parter. At least on the flip side, because I'm competing online and in the comfort of my own home, I'll be able to record each of my matches without the need for a video camera. So each match in today's video will be showcased in the game's true direct capture HD glory. The only other times I get to regularly have direct capture footage is when I get to play on stream. But since I rarely get to appear on stream at all, all, this is kind of a nice change of pace. We've got some good quality matches that I can showcase any part of at any time. Before I finally start discussing each tourney in great detail, there are just a few additional things that I want to state before I dive into the first tourney. Following the events of one of my previous Road to Sakurai episodes, a fair share of friends got in contact with me, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to play a decent amount of practice matches against them. And it was some of these friends that introduced me to a few of the tournaments that I entered today. And I'm definitely thankful that I was able to play a fair share of practice matches against them. But unfortunately, practice matches won't mean too much. The true challenge lies in the tournaments themselves. For the tournaments I plan to discuss today, I'll be discussing them in the order of when they initially happened. This episode was originally slated to be released before the release of Min Min, but I figured that the introduction of a new character was a more important topic to discuss than a regular old online tourney. So if you want to see me compete as Min Min, please tune in to the next video. Otherwise, these are some older tournaments, but they're still relevant. Whew! Okay, that was a lot of setup info, but I think we're good to go now. Let's discuss the first online tourney I entered, the Lockdown Series. In response to the sudden surge of online competitions, my friend Sicken launched a tournament known as the Lockdown Series. He's held a few of these events and he invited me to participate after seeing one of my Road to Sakurai videos. The Lockdown Series that I entered took place back in May of 2020. Most of the players that compete in this tournament are friends within his circle, but he and most of his friends regularly compete as well. The Lockdown Series usually consists of about a dozen or so players, which means it's a relatively small tournament. But a tournament is a tournament, and I competed in it. For the first round, I played against a player named Overflow. We agreed to play on Battlefield for the first match, and I requested that we play on the non-default Battlefield so that it'd make my footage a little more diverse. He thankfully agreed. The beginning of the match had us trading blows fairly frequently, but I was able to keep up my pressure against him, thus giving me the upper hand. I kept trying to edge guard him, and while I was able to land a few hits with a few of Kazooie's eggs, Terry just kept making it back. I was finally able to secure a good lead after landing a powerful smash attack during one of his recovery attempts, which knocked off his first stock. Now that I was one stock ahead and at a decent percentage, I then proceeded to play the next portion of the match fairly aggressively. That wound up working against me at first, as it didn't take long for one of Terry's attacks to completely blow me away. So then I switched to a more defensive tactic, and after a few close calls, I was able to take off Terry's second stock during another one of his recovery attempts. But then it didn't take Overflow long to even the match and take off my second stock. Now that we were both down to our final stocks, I just tried to rely on any combos I knew. Grab pummels into jabs, landing aerials after hitting with a grenade. You get the idea. And I was able to win the game shortly thereafter once I landed a Wonder Wing against him. On the second game, Overflow switched to Cloud, and we played on Battlefield again, this time on the default variant. I landed a few blows pretty quickly in the match and held a reasonable lead, but Overflow's pressure with Cloud didn't let up. Fortunately, I was able to give Cloud's first stock after shooting an egg at him while he was recovering. I then proceeded to use up Banjo's Wonder Wings where I could, as I figured that if I didn't use them, I'd soon lose them. And I was right. I lost my first stock fairly quickly afterward. But then I came back with a vengeance. It took some time to actually take off Cloud's second stock, and I came close a few different times, but I kept up the pressure. I was almost able to knock out Cloud without taking too much damage, but Cloud got a few hits on me before I finally launched him off the stage with Banjo's back throw. I then utilized a mix of projectiles to rack up Cloud's percentage, and I was almost able to gimp him once again. Although my gimping attempt was unsuccessful, I defeated Cloud right afterward using Banjo's Wonder Wing, which means that I defeated Overflow and advanced on to the next round. Thank you for the matches, Overflow! For the next round, I played against the host of the tourney himself, Sicken. Mind you, at this point, due to the low amount of players for the tournament, this was already a semi-final round for the winner's side of the bracket. This means that this set would only end once a player won 3 games instead of 2. So, it's a best 3 out of 5. For the first game, I used Banjo and Sicken used Tooney, and we played on Final Destination. Or rather, the Omega version of Great Plateau, for diversity's sake. Tooney's barrage of projectiles proved to be very tricky for me, and after trying to evade the Hylian hero's follow-up sword attacks for a good minute, I was finally hit with a powerful enough attack to cause me to lose my first stock. Once again, Sicken kept up the pressure, and I just couldn't find an opening. I was only able to take off his first stock after I got lucky with the angle that Banjo's down tilt launched him, and from there, I hit him with one of Kazooie's eggs, which made Tooney just shy of being able to recover back to the ledge. So I took off a stock. Great! I still had a lot of work to do though, so I tried to do as much chip damage to Tooney as possible until I could once again get him off stage and give him with an egg. And fortunately, I was able to do so, which meant that I took the lead. But Sicken wasn't giving up that easily. He was still able to keep up a fair amount of pressure, and while I did get some good hits in, he took off my second stock like it was no sweat. The final stocks between the both of us was a scary showdown, with proper shielding and spacing being of the utmost importance. But I knew I could always use one of my Wonder Wings to get through his projectiles. If I could just get one good hit, I could secure a victory. So I launched a Wonder Wing, and it was a direct hit! But he survived! So I launched another, which also happened to be my last one, and it was still no good. But finally, as Tooney survived, I was able to grab him, And, thanks to the 2 hits from the Wonder Wings I landed, Toon Link's percentage was high enough to where a back throw would secure the victory. On to game 2, we each stuck to the same characters and we played on Unova Pokemon League, a stage that is sometimes legal and was definitely allowed in this event. I took off Toon Link's first stock after using a Wonder Wing to get through his projectiles, and it dealt enough knockback to prevent Toon Link from recovering properly. But I couldn't be careless just because I was in the lead. Sicken still kept up the pressure. He managed to launch me off the stage with a back throw and take off my first stock, but then I came right back in and took off his second one. Now that I was an entire stock ahead, I had a fair share of Wonder Wings at my disposal, but I was only able to get in one before Sicken kept attacking me. It wasn't long afterward that he took off my second stock. So much for just constantly winging it. In fear of another barrage of Toon Link's projectiles, I tried to keep my distance and rack up damage where I could. Once he was over 100%, I used a Wonder Wing to take off Toon Link's last stock and win the game. For the third game, Sicken switched to Cloud, and we played on Town and City. We each made a fair share of mistakes in the beginning of the match, and I even exhausted all of my Wonder Wings before I could even get Cloud beyond 100%. Fortunately, after getting knocked off stage, I was able to make it back to a ledge pretty safely, and from there I was able to grab Cloud and throw him into the blast zone. But Cloud quickly came back in and launched me through the stage's ceiling. So the game was even again, and we kept hitting each other until I was able to use a Wonder Wing to take off Cloud's second stock. During my attempts to take off Cloud's third stock, I used up my last Wonder Wing to try and get Cloud off of me. But unfortunately, Cloud came right back in, used one of his limit break attacks on me, and a poorly timed shield on my part caused me to get hit by the strongest part of his attack and lose my second stock. And then I came very close to defeating Sicken in a few different instances, and I had a pretty sizable lead. But before I knew it, Cloud landed a forward smash on me, and it was enough to take off my final stock. Alas, I lost this game. On to game 4. For this game, we went to Final Destination, or rather an Omega stage again. You know what I mean. In any case, I kept missing my attacks and Sicken kept landing his. But then there came an opportunity for me to take off Cloud's first stock. And I blew it! Sicken evaded my attack and took off my first stock instead. Finally, after taking a few more hits, I threw out a Wonder Wing, and luckily for me, it took off Cloud's first stock. Then, in a desperate attempt to keep Cloud off me, I managed to push him back and land another Wonder Wing, which took off his second stock. But now that I was out of Wonder Wings at my second stock's end, I figured that it was important to just deal whatever damage I could before I was taken down to my final stock. Sure enough, Sicken took off my second stock, but not before I gave myself a 94% lead. That meant that I could go in, throw out a Wonder Wing, and that's exactly what I did. Thus, I defeated Sicken with a 3-1 score and advanced onto the winners finals of the tournament. In winners finals, I played against a player named Dorf. As you can imagine, he played Ganondorf, and he played a pretty competent one too. He got some powerful hits on me, but I was able to take off his first stock by gifting him with an egg. I managed to get a few more hits on him and used a few more Wonder Wings, but then he used one of Ganondorf's signature setups. He grabbed me, caused me to fall to the ground, and then he made a proper read and destroyed me. He managed to make a few more great reads on me, eventually getting to the point where he broke my shield, and of course from there, he Warlock punched me and took off my second stock. And shortly afterward, he took off my third stock and won the game. So for the second game, I took him to good old Pokemon Stadium 2. Dorf continued to land some heavy blows on me, but I managed to make a comeback by grabbing him, burying him, and up-tilting him. A Banjo classic. With his first stock out of the way, I had to make sure I didn't fall into any more of Ganondorf's setup traps. I tried to use a few of my own setups, to not much avail, and I soon lost my first stock. After getting Ganondorf off the stage for a moment, I tried to edge guard him to the best of my abilities. Not much luck. I then knocked Ganondorf to the other side of the stage, and there I did have some luck. I managed to take off his second stock. I then realized that I had a pretty good lead, so I just kept throwing out my Wonder Wings. Some worked, but some weren't such a great idea. I used up my last Wonder Wing for the stock, and Dorf smacked me and took off my second stock. And pretty quickly, he started to make a comeback, and I started to become a bit desperate. If I could land just one Wonder Wing on him, I could win. Perhaps I could go throw him and defeat him that way? Nope. Well, maybe I just... Oh, a dash attack. Okay, I guess that'll do the trick. Game 2 goes to me. Game 3 took place on Kalos Pokemon League with the same characters. Ganondorf was quick to land some heavy blows on me, and I was quick to try and play a bit more defensively. I thought I was about to take off his first stock, but nope. He took off my first stock instead. After a few more seconds, I tried to gift him with an egg, but that wasn't gonna work anymore. But I did hit him with a forward smash, and that was enough to knock off a stock. We then kept trying to read each other, and the game remained relatively even for a bit. I wound up taking the lead after landing a Wonder Wing, but not too long after, Dorf tied up the game with a well-timed up smash. But hey, I was able to land some projectile hits on him, and I had him set up to secure a defeat with another Wonder Wing. And I went the wrong way. But then I turned around and hit him! And that brought the score to 2-1. For Game 4, we went back to Kalos Pokemon League, but Dorf switched to Lucina. His Lucina play was very aggressive, so I tried to react by playing aggressively too. This worked out well, with the game being mostly even until I saw Lucina trying to recover and I landed a Wonder Wing against her. I then switched to a more defensive playstyle in fear of losing my first stock so quickly. Sure enough, I held my ground for a fair amount of time before losing my first stock, but upon respawning, Dwarf quickly evened up the game and quickly took the lead after I failed to recover properly. Now at a disadvantage, I started to use up all of my Wonder Wings in an attempt to tie the game back up. I missed the first 4, but I managed to land the 5th one, but now that I was out of Wonder Wings on the final stock, things seemed grim. However, Dwarf had a missed input, and Lucina was unable to recover properly. Thus, she lost her final stock, gave me the game, and allowed me to win the set. It's kind of a crummy way to go down, I acknowledge, but Dwarf put up one heck of a fight, and he could have taken that. Either way, thank you for the matches, Dwarf. This now put me in the grand finals on the winner's side, which meant that I'd have to lose 2 sets in order to be eliminated from the tournament. This also meant that my score was now 3-0, which at the time, not counting winning due to player disqualifications, was my best score in a tourney. However, my opponent for grand finals turned out to be the tournament organizer, Sicken, once again. He climbed his way through the losers bracket and met me in the final round to try and take revenge. So we got started on Final Destination, the actual Final Destination stage this time. Toon Link tried to set up his projectile wall, but I managed to take off his first stock quickly enough to prevent him from doing so. And onto the second stock, I got Toon Link off stage for a moment and I stage spiked him, which put me at a 3-1 lead. Sicken then tried to be a bit more aggressive so that he could take off my first stock, and in doing so, he almost self-destructed. I mistakenly saved him after attempting to stage spike him again, and just a moment later, I lost my first stock. I then made a foolish mistake and quickly lost my second stock. Dang it! I could have had this game with a 3-0 score, but instead I'm making foolish mistake after foolish mistake. Finally, I was able to get Toon Link off stage again, and this time, instead of going for a stage spike, I gimped him with some eggs. Close call. Closer than it needed to be. Sicken then switched to Cloud, and we played on Kallow's Pokemon League. Switching to Cloud seemed to be wise for Sicken, as he took off my first stock in less than a minute. He almost took off my second stock just as quickly, but I managed to recover from a few hits and land an up smash against him to even the score. Well, at that point, I was over 120%, and that meant that Cloud could just come in and swipe me, which is exactly what he did. And I didn't have any luck taking off his second stock. In fact, in a rather scary exchange of attacks, I had my shield broken, and Cloud used that opportunity to win the game. The score is now 1-1. For Game 3, we went to Unova Pokemon League, and although things were pretty even in the beginning, Sicken managed to read my attack, properly evade it, and counter it accordingly. I lost my first stock, and shortly afterward I lost my second one due to constant pressure and edge guarding from Cloud. But I didn't get 3-0'd. I finally managed to take off Cloud's first stock, and then, sure enough, Cloud used his limit break on me and won the game. Now into Game 4, I chose to have Sicken and I play on Town and City, in hopes that I could use the stage's infrequent platforms to my advantage and try to space out Cloud. And that kinda worked. I took off Cloud's first stock and took the lead, but then Cloud and I got into a smash-off with each of us spot dodging each other's attacks. That eventually led to Cloud hitting me with a dash attack, which dealt enough knockback to send me into the blast zone. Some more intense shenanigans later, I got Cloud into a setup where I was able to smash him off the stage and take off his second stock. I then started to get a pretty decent lead and things were looking good, but then I was backed into the edge of the stage, and one aerial attack from Cloud brought me down to my final stock. I then whipped not one, but 2 Wonder Wings, and Cloud saw an opportunity and defeated me. This means that Sicken won 3 games and won the set. But because he came in from the losers bracket, this means that he still had to win another set to become the champion winner. In other words, this was a bracket reset, and therefore, we had to play another best 3 out of 5 set. So, going into the new Game 1, I switched to Yoshi. Although Yoshi vs. Cloud is a terrible matchup for me, I realized that I'd been exclusively using Banjo this entire tourney. I thought that switching to Yoshi would allow me to have a bit more of a mental refresher, and even if I lost, I'd still need to lose 2 more games to be eliminated from the tournament. So Sicken and I went back to Town and City for Game 1 of the bracket reset, Yoshi vs. Cloud. Things were even until I missed a ground pound and was punished for it. Cloud continued to destroy me, but I was able to break his shield and take off his first stock. But I was only able to deal about 43% worth of damage before Cloud took off my second stock. And then I just got spiked and lost my final stock. Game 1 goes to Sicken. So yeah, playing as Yoshi didn't work out as well as I hoped. I switched back to Banjo and I went back to Town and City. Sicken just kept banning Smashville, which is actually where I wanted to play, but it was a smart move on his part. I had a hard time landing any sort of stock finishing moves on Cloud. I managed to take the lead by properly edge guarding Cloud, but my lead didn't last very long. Cloud immediately took off my stock afterward, and sure enough, Cloud defeated me. It's a shame. It looks like I could have had this match, but Sicken's constant pressure got the better of me. And at this point, Sicken only needed 1 more game to win the entire championship, so I had to be careful going forward. Sicken and I stuck to the same characters and we went to Unova Pokemon League, and I was able to keep up a fair share of pressure. My first Wonder Wing of the game managed to take off Cloud's first stock, and things were looking great for me. Even when he'd get a few hits on me, I'd make sure to get a few hits back on him too. Cloud started to catch up, but by the time I took off his second stock, I still had a pretty decent lead. I used up the last of my Wonder Wings for the stock, but I felt like it didn't matter. I still had an entire other stock, and I felt like I was gonna win. But then I started to make foolish mistake after foolish mistake, and Cloud was just taking full advantage of every mistake I made. And it wasn't long afterward where Cloud took off my third stock, won the game, and as a result, won the tournament. Kudos to Sicken, and thanks for the matches. What a comeback! So there you have it. That was my first online tournament for the series, and although it only featured a few players, I was happy to be a part of it. These were players that were definitely tough, and I'll take my victories where I can. I was the runner-up of the event, and for this being my tournament debut among these players, I'll gladly accept that. And hey, it was great practice. My first online tournament wasn't all too bad of an experience, but some of you might wonder if these victories really count. After all, I'm really just winning against a specific friend group, right? Well, Sicken invited me to another tourney, and this other tourney changed things up a bit. Sicken's next event would feature a lot of the same players, but this time there was a catch. There would be a prize pot at the end. That means the winner would receive money! And now that there was a prize involved, a few more competitive players decided to compete in an attempt to get in on the excitement. My friend Sicken hosted another tournament, this time with a prize pot. Additionally, players could also choose Woohoo Island as a stage for this tournament, which is a stage that is normally not tournament legal. The tournament was still relatively small, but it featured quite a fair share of powerful competitors. Anyway, let's get into it. Because of my strong result from the previous tournament, I was placed as a top seed for this event. As a result, that meant that I got to skip the first round, and due to the lower amount of players for this tourney, that meant that I was already in the winners semi-finals section for this tournament, which means that all the matches were played as a 3 out of 5 set rather than a standard 2 out of 3. So I played off against Boosted Ramen. For our first match, we played on Battlefield, where he was Toon Link and I was Banjo. I managed to get his first stock off rather quickly after slamming him with a forward smash. Unfortunately, my recording of this match got glitchy, which resulted in a mostly corrupted video file, so for better or for worse, my summary of the match has to end here. I won the match, but Boosted Ramen was no slouch. For the second game, we went to the Omega version of the PictoChat stage, so that we could have Megalovania as our song choice. We stuck to the same characters, but in contrast to the first game, I wasn't able to knock off Toon Link's first stock so quickly. In fact, he got off my first stock after I missed a Wonder Wing, and after respawning, I was then able to knock him out. From there, I managed to take the upper hand after I pressured him off stage, and eventually I was able to hit him hard enough to take off his second stock. I came close to wrapping up the game, but Boosted Ramen just wouldn't let me have the win that easily. He took off my second stock, and he and I began to trade a few more blows. Fortunately, I was able to endure his hits, take off his final stock, and win the game. For our next match, we played on the Omega version of the Summit, once again so that we could listen to Megalovania while we played. However, Boosted Ramen chose to switch to Violet. I got a few hits in early, and I took off Violet's first stock not too long afterward. I was able to deal 100% worth of damage to my opponent before I lost my first stock, and it wasn't long afterward before I came back in, got a good read with the Wonder Wing, and brought Boosted Ramen down to his final stock. I was able to win the set after I flung Violet off the stage and gimped her with one of Banjo's recovery platforms. Thus, that brought me into the finals for the tournament. Thank you for the matches, Boosted Ramen. Now into Winners Finals. My next opponent was a player named Lunatic. For the first game in our 3 out of 5 set, I started as Yoshi and he started as Kirby. Lunatic had an aggressive playstyle, and he definitely kept up a fair share of pressure with his combos. We regularly traded blows, with each of us getting a fair share of stylish hits in one after another. But Lunatic took the lead after he hit me with a powerful up smash attack. But hey, two could play at this game. I made a proper read, up smashed him, and tied the game. For the next portion of the match, things were fairly even again, with each of us taking turns comboing each other. It was a pretty intense, close game, but I managed to up smash him into the top blast zone and take the lead. I was then able to deal some heavy damage to Kirby, but an unfortunate recovery on my part gave Lunatic the perfect opportunity to take off my second stock. So at this point, even though I had the lead, the win could really go to either of us. Both of us tried some risky, predictable maneuvers, and neither one of us were able to end the game with them. But then I saw an opportunity where Kirby would have to re-grab the ledge, and I used that opportunity to use Yoshi's down smash and secure the victory. On to the second game, we stuck to the same characters and we played on Town and City. I started the match by going in hard. Although Kirby got a few hits on me, I was able to take Lunatic's first stock in under 30 seconds thanks to Yoshi's big ol' nose spike attack. And I held a big lead for quite a bit, even taking off Kirby's second stock before I lost my first one. And then I saw a great opportunity to stage spike Kirby again, and I missed! And Lunatic full on used the opportunity to spike me instead. And now I was down to my final stock. but at least I had a 132% lead, and as a result, I was able to run up to Kirby, smash him with Yoshi's nose, and win the game. Now in Game 3, Lunatic switched to Mario, and we moved over to Smashville. Much like Lunatic's Kirby, Lunatic's Mario playstyle was very aggressive. We were able to trade blows, sure, but I had a harder time hitting Mario than I did Kirby. And sure enough, Mario's swift up smash attack took off my first stock, but I came back with a vengeance. We traded a quick blow, but my blow to him was enough to take off his first stock. But then he came back with a quick vengeance and made quick work of my second stock. I had a lot of work to do at this point, and I tried to do what I could. We kept smacking each other, and I was only able to get off Mario's second stock after I got him off stage and hit him with Yoshi's neutral air. There was now a chance, but there was no certainty that I'd have this game. Mario then forward smashed me, and it looked like that was it. But hey, I actually managed to directionally influence myself properly this time. I was alive! But at this point, I was at a dangerously high percentage, so I tried to keep my distance where I could. I kept trying to go for grabs in an attempt to safely rack up Mario's percentage, and then I got Mario's percentage up to 128, but things were still scary. I then missed a ground pound, and it looked like that'd be it, but I survived Mario's throw! But then I had to make it back onto the stage, and I just couldn't do so in a safe manner. I lost the game. So we had to play a fourth game, and we moved over to Kalo's Pokemon League. I switched to Banjo, and I hoped that I could play a bit more defensively, since our Mario vs. Yoshi match turned out to be aggression versus aggression. Since we just played a match like that and Mario was the victor, I figured I couldn't play like that again. So now that I was playing as Banjo, I took the lead, but a powerful aerial string from Mario evened the match. Then, a poor move on my part caused Lunatic to take off my first stock. After taking a few more hits, I managed to get Mario off the stage, and after a few edge guarding attempts, I successfully gimped Mario with an egg. I held my second stock for as long as I could. Mario just kept knocking me around. Although I got Mario's percentage up to a decent amount, I spent most of my stock just trying to land back on the stage. So it was only a matter of time before Mario knocked me off the arena for good. And he did. And he continued to juggle me on my third stock. And in a desperate attempt to even the game and prevent myself from being knocked all over the place again, I exhausted a lot of my Wonder Wings. Finally, I did take off Mario's second stock, but not before reaching 98%. And now that I was almost out of Wonder Wings, things were looking dire. I hung in there for a little bit, but Mario just kept up his pressure, and he took off my final stock. Looks like we're playing a Game 5. I stuck to Banjo and Lunatic stuck to Mario. This time, we returned to Smashville, and I picked the stage with the hopes that Mario wouldn't be able to juggle me as easily. I was wrong. Well, for the most part anyway. Mario just kept landing his aerial strings on me, but I was able to take off his first stock with a well-timed forward smash hit. Lunatic maintained his aggressive playstyle and took off my first stock. But hey, at least I was able to get Mario beyond 70% before he was able to knock off my stock. I can work with that, and sure enough, I got Mario's second stock with a well-timed Wonder Wing. Okay, I may have a chance here, or I may have spoken too soon. One spike from Mario evened the game, and just like that, my lead was gone in an instant. And then Mario just aggressively smacked me around, and I lost the game, which means I lost the set. What the heck happened? Man, I felt like I could have had that. But then, in the blink of an eye, Lunatic got the W. 3 times in a row, too. Well, what can I say? Well played, Lunatic. It's off to the losers bracket for me. But at least that immediately put me into losers finals, and my next opponent was named Swanky Palm Tree. I played as Banjo and he played as King Dedede. He tried to utilize King Dedede's defensive Gordo throwing and powerful hammer swings to take me out, but I was able to take off his first stock after landing a few Wonder Wings and an up smash attack. For Dedede's second stock, I was a bit more cautious. I didn't go for any powerful blows until he was beyond 100%, and at that point, I grabbed him, buried him, and went for an up smash attack. And I missed! Hang on, let me try that again. There we go! Swanky Palm Tree then came back in and took off one of my stocks, and following that, he tried to get me with Dedede's old inhale tactics. He was unsuccessful, and in fact, he wound up self-destructing after attempting to do so. That means that the first game went to me. For the second game, we moved to the Omega version of Woohoo Island. I stuck to Banjo, and he switched to Ken. I managed to get his percentage pretty high pretty quickly, which meant that once I saw the opportunity to smash him with a Wonder Wing, I took it. I managed to land a bunch of additional hits on him, and there came a point where I thought I could just up smash him. I went for it, he parried the hit, and then he Shoryukened me, causing me to lose my first stock. But I then took his second stock after I knocked him to the ground and followed up with an up smash attack. Then, after getting Ken's percentage high enough and throwing him off the stage, I won the game with one of Banjo's aerial attacks. For Game 3, Swanky Palm Tree switched back to King Dedede, and we played on the battlefield version of my favorite stage, Boxing Ring. Dedede threw a lot of Gordos at me, and I tried to hit them back whenever I could. Swanky and I were fairly even, with each of us just barely unable to take each other's first stock. I was able to smash Dedede on one of his rebounds, but Dedede just didn't leave me very many opportunities to hit him once he respawned. He took my second stock and evened the game. That is, until I took his second stock after one fell swoop. However, DDD then managed to break my shield, and using the powerful force of his hammer, he took my second stock and tied up the game again. I got DDD up to a high percentage, but I just couldn't quite secure the finishing blow. But then, DDD went for a hammer swing, and I went for a Wonder Wing, and boom! I landed my hit, and I won the game. And therefore, I won the set and moved on to Grand Finals. Thanks for playing, Swanky Palm Tree! I made it to Grand Finals, and my final opponent was once again Lunatic, but this time, because I was on the loser's side, I needed to win 2 sets in a best 3 out of 5 format in order to win the tourney. This would not be easy. And this time, Lunatic went straight for Mario, and I went straight for Banjo. Mario just kept landing hit after hit, but before I knew it, I actually managed to tie up the game. We were both well over 100%, but that meant that either one of us could have gone blasting off at any moment. And sure enough, I was the first one to go blasting off. And Lunatic just wouldn't let me even up the game after that. At least not without a bit more pressure from Mario first. He got 46% damage on me before I took off his first stock. But that's okay. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. I used up the last of my Wonder Wings for the stock to try and get Mario off of me, so at this point, I was somewhat ready to be knocked out again. But then I had an opportunity to take off Mario's stock, and I missed! Dang it! And he got me instead. Mario then attempted to finish the game quickly once I respawned, but I just couldn't let that happen. But he was able to pull off that maneuver again, and that time, he hit me and won the game. Ugh. What a shameful way to go down. For game 2, I brought Yoshi back out. Maybe Banjo was too big of a target, and maybe a little more up-close combat was what I needed. And sure enough, that seemed to work. I got Mario off stage, and an unfortunate recovery on Lunatic's end allowed me to take the first stock. Now that I had a pretty sizable lead on my hands, I could afford to trade blows and take a few hits if it meant also causing Mario's percentage to rise. Lunatic took off my first stock in due time, but I didn't let him deal too much damage to me before I knocked him out again. Still though, Lunatic was getting quite a few hits on me, and while I didn't mind trading, I started to fear that things could be evened up again sooner than I anticipated. I went for a spike, and I landed the hit, but Mario was still able to make it back. But I had to maintain my aggressive playstyle. It was the only way to counter Lunatics. I got Mario off stage again, and I tried going for a game-ending blow. I missed. But it was enough to cause Mario to spot dodge and fall to his doom. For game 3, we chose to play on Woohoo Island. How often were we going to get the opportunity to play on this stage in our tournament? Early on, I got some good hits in, but the stage made me very nervous. The stage's ledges were raised up a bit, and as Yoshi, I feared that I could very easily miss them if I ever tried to air dodge into them. So I didn't really want to go off stage all too much, and that led to the downfall of my first stock. After throwing Mario around on stage, he just forward smashed me and sent me flying. Mario tried to do the same thing later on in the match, but this time I avoided the hit, smacked Mario, and tied up the game. Normally, I'd have thought that a slightly gimmicky stage would give me the advantage, since I play on gimmicky stages in my own time, all the time. But Lunatic seemed ready to roll. I struggled to take off his second stock, and he just kept chipping away at me. I then made the right move at the right time, as Mario went for a cape attack, but I went for a down smash, and down smash hits both sides of me regardless. So although I was spun around because of the cape, my down smash still took out Mario's second stock. And although I came close to taking off Mario's third stock and winning the game, I missed an attack, and Mario hit his. The win goes to Lunatic again. Now, this next game was the championship point. For game 4, we stuck to our characters, and we played on the Omega version of Halberd. After a few quick blows, I was able to break Mario's shield. I hoped a forward smash would knock him out, but it was just too early in the match for that sort of thing to work. I then tried to get him with the old egg leg ground pound maneuver. No dice. But finally I took off Mario's first stock as he was recovering shortly thereafter. Then, I started to get my own aerial strings against Mario in, and before I knew it, I lost my stock. Drat. And then a missed input nearly cost me my second stock. Well, I guess it still technically did, because it was just a mere moment after my incorrect move that I got hit into the blast zone. I managed to get Mario off the stage, and I tried to knock him out while I had the chance, but I was unsuccessful. And he tried to spike me, but he was also unsuccessful, and in his case, he lost his stock as a result. So I guess at that point, Lunatic figured that if he couldn't hit me down, then he'll just hit me up. And with that, Lunatic landed another blow and took me out of the match. This means that Lunatic was the winner of the tourney, and I was the runner-up. Ah, well. Good games, Lunatic! Making a run back from the loser's bracket is no easy task, especially when the person that I had to defeat in Grand Finals was the guy that sent me to the loser's bracket in the first place. Still, I'm glad the games were close. It was an intense tourney, and I'm thankful that I was invited to it. In any case, I did receive a small payout for earning the runner-up position, and this would mark the first time I'd ever earned money for competing. Granted, it was a smaller tourney, and I was automatically placed into the second round, and that meant that the overall payout wasn't anything massive, but hey, I'll take what I can get. And all things considered, I won more games than I lost overall, so it's all still a win in my book. And for those curious, I used the earnings to treat myself to some chicken tenders. So all in all, it was a relatively pleasant, competitive, and informative experience. The next tourney that I shall be discussing in this video functions a bit differently than a traditional Super Smash Bros. Ultimate tourney. It was an official tourney held by Nintendo. On the official Nintendo vs. Twitter account, Nintendo regularly holds tournaments across various games where players can win digital download codes and gold Nintendo points if they rank highly enough. In the past, Nintendo has used their own rule sets that usually involve items and special stage lists. But for this event, Nintendo held a more traditional tournament. For the most part. They had a pretty regular rule set with 3 stocks, no items, no hazards, and a pretty safe stage list. But the way players would play against one another would be different. Generally speaking, Smash tourneys usually seed competitors into brackets, and from there, it's up to the players to climb their way to the top by getting through each set. However, when you have thousands of players registered for an event, this process can take a long time, especially if it's all done online. This is why larger competitions such as EVO have to hold their tourney matches over the span of several days. And if this video's length is any indication, just one set of matches can take a while. So instead, Nintendo switched to a Swiss style of matches. If you're unfamiliar with this format, here's the simplest way I can explain it. No matter what, every player will play the same number of matches. And rather than climbing through a tournament bracket and being eliminated after you lose 1 set or 2 sets, the goal is simply to be the player with the best win-loss ratio after all of the matches are played. From there, the top 32 players will be placed into a traditional bracket. For the sake of this tournament, all players were slated to play 10 sets, though I think some players had to play an additional 11th set for tiebreakers, but you get the idea. Every player was playing at least 10 sets. So if you wanted to, you could go 0-10. Anyway, after every set you played, you'd be paired up against another player with the same win-loss ratio as you. So if you won your first set, you were technically 1-0, and your next opponent would be someone with a 1-0 score. And if later on you won 3 sets but lost 1, then your next opponent would be another player with a 3-1 score. So, this Nintendo-sponsored event should be a better testament of my skill as a competitor. With that explanation out of the way, let's get into the specifics of each of my matches. There are going to be 10 matches here, so I'm going to try to provide quicker, simpler explanations for each of these, rather than more detailed ones. My first opponent was a player named Shadow. He chose Ridley and I chose Yoshi, and we started on Pokemon Stadium 2. At first, he made me a bit nervous, but he made a few mistakes that allowed me to gain the advantage. I landed some powerful blows against him, but he caught up pretty quickly. But I was able to take off one of his stocks while he was recovering, but he wound up securing a victory after he hit me with Ridley's up smash. I then switched to Banjo for game 2, and we played on Lilac Cruise. I started off pretty strong, but Shadow was no pushover. He kept me on my toes, but I later wound up taking the lead with a well-timed hit. And I proceeded to take a second stock by giving him with an egg. In fact, I took off his third stock in a similar fashion, and that allowed me to win the game. For the final game, we moved over to Town and City, and Shadow switched to Inkling. Shadow's Inkling play was tricky, and I certainly couldn't gimp him easily like I could when he played as Ridley. Shadow took the lead, and he almost took my first stock after he buried me with his roller. But luck was in my favor, as Inkling was out of ink, and therefore her attack couldn't deal enough knockback to me. But Inkling got another chance just afterward. But then I went in, grabbed her, and buried her. And I missed my follow-up attack, so I couldn't take her stock. So I tried again, and it still didn't work. But third time's the charm, and I finally got off Inkling's first stock and evened the game. We continued to get some good hits on each other, and I managed to take Inkling's second stock after charging my forward smash attack a bit longer than usual. Inkling managed to even things up, but I was victorious thanks to a good old Wonder Wing. Good game, Shadow! In round 2, I fought a player named Freeze Flame. I started as Yoshi and he started as Young Link. Of course, if I knew he'd be Young Link, then I'd have been Banjo, but that's how these tourneys go sometimes. This is not a preferable matchup for me, as I struggle to fight more defensively oriented characters. In fact, the main reason I even play as Banjo is to deal with more defensive characters. I guess it's good practice and it's a matchup I should learn, but the reason I'm terrible at this matchup was shown on full display here. I wasn't gonna go down without a fight, and there were moments where I could have had him, but he got me, and he won the first game. But now that I knew he played Young Link, I switched to Banjo. This time, things worked out quite a bit better. I was able to pressure him instead of him pressuring me. And once I took the lead, I just kept up my pressure where I could. Lag certainly wasn't helping things, but I was able to maintain my lead, keep up the pressure, and ultimately win the game. For the final match, he switched to regular Link and we played on Final Destination. It was a laggy match, and that definitely messed me up quite a bit. Link took the lead, I caught up, Link took the lead again, lag continued to be a nuisance, and Freeze Flame won the game. It may sound bitter and salty of me to say, but lag definitely ruined me several times in the match. It is what it is. Now my score is 1-1. Round 3! My opponent was named Anthonry. We started off on Yoshi's Island, which, yes, was legal for this tournament, with him playing Byleth and me playing Banjo. Anthonry demonstrated some tactical Byleth plays, and he held the lead for a while. There was even a moment where I was just waiting on a ledge, unsure as to what I should do in order to get back up. In any case, I got slammed by one of Byleth's weapons, and sure enough, Anthonry won the first game. For the second game, we moved over to Town and City, and some good follow-ups from me allowed me to take off Byleth's first stock. But Anthonry was persistent, and I tried to use that to my advantage. I just kept grabbing grabbing and burying Byleth, and after getting her percentage high, I just Wonder Winged her. And for her last stock, I was able to gimp her with one of Kazooie's eggs. Huzzah! I'm still in it! For the final game, we played on Yoshi's story. Banjo's grabs and follow-ups proved to be very useful here, as they were essential to me taking Anthony's first stock. He wound up catching up quickly, but I still stand by my point. Banjo's grabs and follow-ups were of the utmost importance. I took off Violet's second stock without even taking a hit. Our percentages were even, but then I grabbed her, buried her, and defeated her. Whew! That was a close one. Thank you for the matches, Anthony. My round 4 opponent was named Quote, and he played as Mario, and he was a very aggressive Mario. It was a short while before I even got a hit on him. He got my first stock, and he tried real hard to take off my second stock with ease. I held my ground for a bit, but he was able to take off my second stock before I could even take off one of his. I finally took off one of his stocks, but it really didn't matter. Quote's Mario was just too strong, and he won the game. So, going into the second game, I switched to Yoshi with the hopes that maybe I could swiftly get some hits on him before he goes crazy on me. We played on Lilac Cruise, and sure enough, things were fairly even. I smashed him into space and took out his first stock, but then he quickly got mine, making things even again. But then I started to have a strong lead against him. I took off his second stock while only taking 25% damage, and sure enough, I won the game without even losing my second stock. Awesome stuff. We played our final game on Yoshi's Island, and I was definitely nervous. We traded our hits, and we played a fairly even game. Mario took off my first stock, and I took off his right after. But then, Mario took a pretty strong lead. I tried to even things up again, and it became very, very intense. There were moments where either one of us could have had it, and the win went to Anthony. Well played, Anthony. Very well played. Now here's where things get weird. My score was currently 2-2, and I fought another opponent with a 2-2 score named JoJo. He played as Diddy Kong and I played as Yoshi. We played a fairly close game, but ultimately I was the victor. Then we played our second game, we stuck to the same characters and we played on the same stage. This time, however, I wouldn't really call the game close. Although JoJo showed competent skill as a Diddy Kong player, I nearly 3-stocked him. And since I won 2 games, that would mean that I was the winner of the set. Or at least, that should be what it means. However, an issue on Battlefy's website prevented us from reporting the score. One of us never clicked the check-in button, despite the fact that we communicated with one another. It might have been me, I don't actually know, but even so, normally a tournament organizer or a moderator can assist with this sort of problem. So I contacted a mod as soon as I could, or at least I tried to call for a mod. No luck. My opponent dipped as soon as the second game ended. So I contacted the Discord server that I had to sign up for in order to participate in the tournament, and I contacted an organizer. The organizer asked me to provide a URL to our match, and I sent that to him. He told me he could no longer access the match because my opponent dipped. And because our set never started, there's nothing he could do. Despite the fact that I recorded the set and I had a screenshot of the page, he couldn't do anything. To me, this is super frustrating and super lame. I wasted my time playing a set, I won the set, and the wins don't count. I tried contacting a moderator on the website multiple times, and nothing worked, and when I finally got in contact with one on Discord, not on the website mind you, he couldn't do anything. If this was a tournament that took place in person, this definitely wouldn't fly. Heck, even other online tourneys allow for organizers to go in, create their own match, and report their own score. Or they can just modify the scores of individual players. But nope, JoJo gets to get off scot-free, and these wins don't matter. I'm sorry to sound harsh, but this type of display definitely makes me not want to compete in online tourneys. If there's an issue and moderators can't do anything about it, then what is even the point? So, I just had to suck it up and move on to my next opponent. This means that I still had a 2-2 score, and I'd have to fight another opponent with the same score, and that I wasted roughly a half hour of my time in this tournament. So, still in round 5 by technicality, my next opponent was named Ra-Ra. He used Lucas and I used Yoshi. Lucas is normally a fairly defensive character, so I was afraid I was gonna have to deal with a bunch of PK attacks the entire match. And while my opponent definitely used a fair share of these moves, I kept him within my sights. I kept pummeling him until I got good hit after good hit, and then I defeated him and won the first game. For the second game, we played as the same characters, and while Ra-Ra got some good hits on me, I was able to consistently rush him down. And he eventually lost his second stock after I just edgeguarded him enough times. Finally, I won the game, and therefore the set, after he tried to re-grab the ledge. I down smashed him, but it didn't defeat him, so I followed it up with a spike with Yoshi's big old noggin. Game 6 with a score of 3-2. My opponent was named Leafy Leaf, and he chose to play as Ike. I chose to play as Banjo. And this is a matchup that I generally find to be favorable to me, simply because Banjo can be cheap when Ike attempts to recover vertically. So naturally, I utilized this tactic to go ahead and give myself the W for game 1. Similarly, in our second game, we chose the same characters, and anytime I had the chance to Wonder Wing Ike while he was recovering, I took it. I was able to take off Ike's first stock, without getting hit mind you, but Ike still came in swinging. Literally. His attacks hurt, man. Just one or two good attacks from him could have ruined me. So I don't feel bad taking his stocks with Wonder Wings. Sure enough, I took the second game and won the set. Now I'm 4-2. Thank you for playing, Leafy Leaf. Game 7. My opponent was named Tim. I started as Banjo and he played as Piranha Plant. We played on the Yoshi's Island stage and Tim attempted to deploy some more defensive tactics. So I figured enough was enough, and anytime I got in for a hit, I made sure to follow up with any other hits I could. I didn't care if I got hit by the plant's poison, so like it or not, I had to get in and stay in. And that seemed to work. I eventually made a comeback and won the match. For the next game, we played on Pokemon Stadium 2, and this time, each of our defensive strategies seemed to work out a bit better. He was able to keep his distance at times, and I was able to keep my distance at times. But once I was able to take off his first stock, Tim started to get a bit more aggressive. I tried to shut him down, and I took off his second stock. Now that I had a full stock advantage, I figured I'd just try to continue to shut him down any sort of way I could. And to conclude the match, I saw an opportunity to Wonder Wing him, and I finished him with it. Thank you for playing, Tim. Game 8. My opponent was named Lisa. Lisa and I started on Final Destination as Ness and Yoshi respectively. I might have been trying to play a bit too aggressively. Lisa wound up winning the first game simply by recovering. I just can't challenge Ness's up B. But rather than switching to Banjo, I decided to give Yoshi another try. I realized what I was doing wrong, and I figured I'd just play differently. And a trade early on in the match worked in my favor, resulting in Ness losing his first stock. But Ness's yo-yo makes for a good edge guarding tool, and he caught me with it, resulting in the game being even again. But it wasn't for long! Another trade resulted in Ness losing his second stock. Lisa desperately wanted to rack up my percentage, and Ness's aerials were able to do so. But I racked up Ness's percentage, and I became victorious after I ground pounded him. For the final game, Lisa switched to King K. Rool, a very defensive King K. Rool. I tried to hover around where I could so I could hit King K. Rool without getting sucked up or smacked by one of his jabs. And this crocodile is just so heavy. I had to get him over 170% before I could secure a stock. Though one good clap from K. Rool caused him to take the lead. And one bad move from me could lead to my instant death against this guy. But I was victorious! Good games, Lisa. My score was at 6-2, and it was time to move into round 9 against a player named Mike. Mike played as King Dedede, and I played as Banjo. As you can imagine, lots of Gordos and grenades were hurled around, and his Gordos just kept hitting me. I might have tried to play a bit too defensively, I just couldn't retaliate too well with my grenades, and as such, Mike took the first game. For game 2, we stuck to the same characters, but this time we played on Battlefield. Plenty more projectiles were shot and thrown around, and neither one of us were quick to take each other's stocks. But overall, it was a fairly slow match. While I eventually did take a second stock, I was out of Wonder Wings at that point, so I had to be very careful. And I guess I was careful enough. Look at those percentages. And when I saw the chance that Dedede was gonna have to re-grab the ledge, I went for a forward smash and took down the king. Game 2 goes to me. For our final game, we played on Smashville and we stuck to the same characters. And this time, I was actually able to hit Dedede's Gordos back at him and be the first one to take a stock. I held the lead for quite a bit, and after several more Gordo throws, Gordo counters, and heavy hits, I got him over 160%. Finally! I defeated this defensive penguin after I landed a successful Wonder Wing attack. And now, the last game, Game 10. My score was 7-2, meaning that my opponent would have the same score and that he or she would only have lost twice up to this point. Sure enough, my opponent was named Melt, and he was tough. We tried to read each other's moves when we could, and each of us made our fair share of mistakes. Although our overall game was mostly even, there were plenty of moments where he made me shake my head and realize what I was doing was foolish. But then there were moments where I thought to myself, "Oh no you don't!" and I would attempt to react accordingly. In the end, Melt won the game, but I'm pleased with how I managed to put up a fight. For the second game, I switched to Yoshi, figuring that he'd be able to keep up better. And I was right! A rush down, in-your-face strategy was the way to go. Although I couldn't quite keep up with Joker when he had Arsene out, my constant aggression led me to breaking Joker's shield. Naturally, I followed up and took off his first stock, and much to my own surprise, I kept rushing him down, even getting to the point where I took off his second stock, after Arsene had come out at another point. I felt that I should just keep it up, and keep it up I did. I got a good jab combo, knocked him off the stage, and finished him with an aerial attack, thus resulting me in 3-stocking him. Woo! And so, Melt decided to switch to Lucina, and we played on Final Destination. Whoa! Yoshi versus Lucina is another matchup I'm no good at, and Lucina is already considered to be a universally challenging character. And yeah, my aggression was not working here. I couldn't rush down Lucina. She just spaced herself accordingly and followed up with several slashes. I could barely land any hits on her, and she just kept swinging her sword at me. But then, I managed to get a good hit in, and just afterward, I managed to follow up a couple times, and I spiked Lucina! So somehow, I was in the lead! At this point, I figured I just needed to land whatever hits I could, since Lucina was bound to take me out immediately afterward. And I held my first stock for much longer than I thought. I was nearly at 200%, and I hadn't lost my stock. And I got Lucina to over 100%. I managed to eat her and shoot her off the stage as an egg, and from there, she self-destructed. And I still held my ground after that, and got in a few more attacks. I could win this. Melt managed to take my first stock, but I had a great lead. I was feeling good. Lucina got a few more hits in, I got a few more hits in, and then I ground pounded her and defeated Melt. This meant that I won the set and that my overall score was 8-2. At this point, the time to compete had concluded. In fact, my set against Melt went a bit overtime beyond Nintendo's scheduled time limit. Now the scores were up, and for players that had similar scores, some players were ranked higher based on the exact other players they defeated. This way, there would be no ties in the tournament. And this also meant that I was ranked at 34th place out of over 3,000 players. That's quite an admirable score. If I got that score at EVO, I'd be bragging about it all the time. However, only the top 32 players got to advance, which means that my time competing in Nintendo's Battlefy event was over. It stings knowing that I was so close, and that one of my sets didn't even count. But if my set did count, would it have mattered in the end? Probably not, unless that player was one of the top players in the event. If he were, my winning score could have potentially placed me higher, maybe even exactly 32nd place. And it's a shame that I have to remember this event by having such an unfortunate circumstance, but at least I was able to earn a pretty good ranking. So yeah, I wish that the mods and organizers behind the event were able to control a few more things, and I hate that some of the matches lagged pretty hard. But my opponents were definitely talented players that pushed my skills to their limits. Knowing that each of my opponents was around the same skill level as me, if not higher, makes me feel like I'm growing as a player. And while I'm still salty that I didn't make it into the top 32, being able to say that I went 8-2, technically 9-2, in an official Nintendo event with over 3,000 players is definitely something that satisfies me. Although I was technically a runner-up in the other two tourneys I discussed in this video, I believe that this rank is my technical best placing so far. I mean, what do you guys think? What's better, getting 2nd out of 16 or so players, or getting 34th out of 3,000? One is a higher placing, but the other is a better score. And I went on to compete in various other online events, but this video has gone on long enough. It is far too long as is. So I'm gonna go ahead and end things here. And next time, I'll be discussing 3 more online events. And those events will have me play as Min Min. And there won't be a tourney that has me play in 10 rounds, so it should be a shorter video. Yeah, this was a long one, but I'll try to keep up the pressure. I'll try to keep getting good rankings. So let's get to it. I'm ready for the next challenge.
Hey, thank you for watching my video all the way to the end. If you want to show your support, one of the best things you can do is leave a comment down below. So if you have anything nice you want to say about the video, or if you have any questions, I'll try to respond to whatever I can at my earliest convenience. Either way, your support means a lot and I really appreciate it. I hope to see you all in the future. Bye-bye!